At this time, it is my pleasure to call the April 2025 meeting of the Hanover Borough Stormwater Authority Committee to order. Let's start by calling the roll.
Tony Thomas.
Margie Lewis.
Tammy Snyder.
Eric Maines.
Bill Ricart.
Tim Schultes.
Brian Johnson.
Let it note for the record, the Stormwater Authority does not have a quorum here this evening, so we will not conduct business as usual, but we will still continue forward with the presentation. I assume that's what you're all here for, not the approval of the minutes. So with that being said, those of you who have an agenda, we will not be approving the minutes, again, as there's not a quorum. I will open it up to our first public comment portion of the meeting, and I have one pre-registration. That would be from Robert Holt. You're welcome to come forward, Mr. Holt.
Thank you, sir. Robert Holt from the 3rd Ward. I've been listening to many presentations in council meetings and some discussions and reading, and there's a lot of discussion about the financial potential for this project and what it would benefit the borough in a couple of ways in terms of the dealing with the treatment of what are known as forever chemicals and also providing some revenue. But what I have not heard a whole lot about is the empirical evidence about the long-term environmental benefits, sir. And just a lot of things come to mind, but what happens 30 years down the road with the material that is produced as a result of this intense superheating process, and which is not incineration, just doesn't burn it up. I think there may be some fly ash residual from it, not a lot, but you know, what happens in the long term, and you know, how much materials get embedded in the ground, what's the possibly minute level of air emissions surrounding the plant. And so I'm always thinking about the long-term impacts, and there's been some information about the funding that's going to be put in reserve accounts and to ensure that if there are long-term impacts, that you know there will be resources and the borough and the taxpayers won't be left holding the bag long after the primary company involved is gone. And you know, can a plant operate for more than 30 years? Is it like some facilities where you can extend the operating license for 40 and 50 years? And but you know, we don't hear that kind of discussion. And I also think we've not heard discussion about the physical features of the facility. I mean, you know, how high is it? Are people going to be able to see it from their backyards or from their farms? Because where you're going to put this facility is near farmland, some of the best farmland in the area, and it's going to be visible from a lot of people's backyards. They're going to see the truck traffic coming up and down their roads. And, you know, what is that going to start with? A little bit with one incinerator, or not incinerator, gasification plant burner, or two, but what is it going to be when there's 4 and this thing is fully operational? And the other thing is, you know, we're talking about $1 million for the borough, but I mean, is that an equitable share for what we're putting up? And that is the company going to make more money than the borough is on this deal? But we're going to get left holding the physical property that ends up being the site where the EPA or the Department of Environmental Protection comes and puts the assessment on, and from there everybody has the burden. Anyway, those are some thoughts, but I would really like to hear more discussion about the long-term environmental impacts, because some of this is still unknown. People can't explain how some elements of the process exactly work. And now there's been recent discussion by York Water Company that gasification alone, treating the sewage, wastewater sewage sludge alone is not going to solve the problems, and that you're going to have to also treat the water upstream before it comes out of the tap. And it's going to be a combination of two things. And so this is not a solution that fixes the entire problem, but it's going to have to be a combination of things. Taking too much time. Thanks.
Can I just add, Mr. Holt, you're referring to PFAS, I assume?
Yes,
Primarily?
what are known as PFAS and PFAS, but
Okay.
if
I just want to make sure I was on the right channel.
Right, if everybody pronounces it the same.
Right. It's the firefighting stuff.
Okay, we have no one else pre-registered to speak during public comment. There will be a post-public comment that I'll be more liberal with as chair for offering post-comments. At this time, we will move into the presentation of the gasification project. I should state for the record that we are recording this. Thank you all for coming out, but this will also be available online at some point in time in the future for those who cannot attend or those who are in attendance to go back and review the presentation.
Slides in there recording? All right, good.
Without further ado, the presentation is going to be by company Earth Care Solutions this evening. I am optimistic. This Stormwater Authority has been sitting through this for over a year, hearing the interesting things that they have to say. It's time for us to engage the public to allow the public to hear what they have to say. We intend for their presentation to give us, obviously, the who, the why, the what, talk about how the revenue is used and where this goes and what that might look like. I'm going to try to allow them to get through their presentation, and if you could hold your questions to the end, we'll allow them to conclude, and then questions can be asked of them. Earth Care, it's all yours.
Appreciate it.
So I'm going to take the first slide just because it's sort of general in nature before this gets too technical, and then I'm not going to be able to talk to some of those things. So I can, however, speak a little bit to the who because I've been engaged with the Stormwater Authority from the beginning on this. So when we talk about this project, and you'll hear this term P3, what P3 means is it stands for a public-private partnership. And sometimes what happens is a community starts to realize that by itself alone, it's not able to do some of the things it needs to do. It has very limited capacity. And so by bringing a private partner in, you get access to things like expertise, resources, capital funding, things like that that can sometimes help a community do things that it's not able to do on its own. And so for this particular project, the P3 is the way in which the Stormwater Authority has chosen to move forward with this. So when we look at this, the Stormwater Authority will have its own role in the project. Largely, the lion's share of that work will be put to the private side, again, because we don't have the resources and the expertise in it. But what we can bring to it is certainly a facility location, and we can bring to it, obviously, some of the needs that the Stormwater Authority has relative to funding some of its stormwater programs, trying to improve water quality, and also just managing some of the day-to-day things with our wastewater treatment plant. You know, we face issues where we're having increasing costs on operations, and so we need to be creative in how we manage those things. The other side, the private side, as you heard from the chairman, is Earth Care Solutions is the private side. They are the ones who ultimately will be financing the project. They are also the ones assuming the risk for the project. And I think that's a very important part, because certainly if you're here as someone who has a share in the borough, in the Stormwater Authority, you want to know that your risk is being managed so that you're not, to the point of the public comment that was made earlier, being left to bear all of that on yourself. You know, we want to make sure that that's put in an appropriate place. The reason why we look at a project like this is largely we have aging and crumbling infrastructure. So for the borough of Hanover, for us from a stormwater side, we have about 21 miles of stormwater pipe in the ground. And I would argue to you that that's probably not what we should have. We should probably have about double that. Where you drive through some of our neighborhoods and you just see an absence of inlets and pipes. That's why we have some of the flooding problems that we have. But the infrastructure that we do have, unfortunately, like a lot of communities, things get prioritized, and it isn't always at the top of the list for things to spend on. The Stormwater Authority was created back in 2018 as a way to try to address that, as a way to create a mechanism that could focus its efforts on trying to improve flooding, trying to improve water quality, trying to improve the way in this community functions regarding stormwater. As we do that, one of the problems that we have is growing regulatory pressures. You know, we're not beholden just to ourselves. You know, we, as a borough, we carry a state and a federal permit known as an MS4 permit. And so us, much like our neighboring partners, they have them as well. We have to manage that, and that carries with it a scope of duties, a scope of responsibilities, as well as a cost that's associated with each one of those things. And so the Stormwater Authority, again, takes on that role to try and find a way to be equitable, to make sure that they're spending dollars in a sensible way and that they're leveraging things as much as they possibly can. Looking at something like a P3 has an opportunity to help us expand what we're looking at. As I mentioned before, also, again, growing costs for biosolids disposal. So from us, for the treatment plant, we unfortunately, at the end of the treatment process, we have a product, we have a biosolids, and we have to do something with that. And right now, what we do with that is we haul that out to farm fields, and that gets put out there, and you know, we have select fields that we put those on. But you have to believe that as those farmers are looking at the horizon and they're looking at the risk in PFOS and PFAS and other things, starting to get question marks. You know, they're starting to look at that and say, I don't know if I really want to do that anymore. Do I want to let them put that on my fields? Because now I'm starting to see, you know, class action lawsuits against DuPont and 3M and these other companies. And so if I'm a farmer, I'm starting to at least want to maybe better inform myself about what's being put on my fields. From us, from the borough side, that generally equates to more cost. More risk equals more cost. And so, you know, for us, we're trying to find better ways to manage that. And the last piece that I'm going to offer before I kind of hand it off here is, you know, our challenge, so we live in a borough right now that's about 58% impervious coverage. If you go into downtown, I think that percentage is probably even higher. But if you look at it overall and you weight out some of the areas outside of the core downtown that have more grass, more open areas and things like that, it waters it down a little bit, but it's still about, you know, almost 60%. When you think about that in terms of runoff, that's a really, really high degree of impervious coverage that generates a lot of volume, and certainly you all see that when you drive around and streets are flooding and it's going over curbs and things like that. That's the problem that we try to deal with. The wastewater treatment side, again, we have certain stresses. Hydraulic stresses is one thing that we face. You know, we normally operate about 5 million gallons per day at our sewage treatment plant. We get a good rainstorm, that spikes up to somewhere up close to 15 million gallons per day. So that tells you there's an intrinsic connection between our treatment plant and the water that's landing and not being properly managed. It's making its way to the treatment plant, and what that means is then the treatment plant has to treat that. You know, they don't get a chance to just kind of divert that off. It has to go through the plant. It has to be treated the same way that wastewater is treated, and that carries a cost with it. The other part is, you know, our current permit, our MS4 permit that I mentioned before, it's changing drastically for us. So in the last permit cycle for us, we had to deal with key pollutants. So we were looking at phosphorus and sediment and nitrogen. Those were our three key things that we had to be concerned about. That's going out the window now. The new permit cycle that's coming in is saying, well, we now want you to look at volume. We want you to look at the volume of runoff that's coming off of your impervious surfaces, and we want you to have a plan to manage that. And so we as a municipality, much like, again, our neighboring partners, we're all kind of there with a big question mark saying, how do I do that? How do I start to manage the sheer volume of runoff that's coming off of these properties? And knowing that it's now going to be quantified, we have to figure out how we want to deal with that. And that unfortunately carries with it costs as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chuck Hegberg. Chuck is a councilman, so he's kind of engaged in some of this, not as a Stormwater Authority member, but certainly as a council member. I think he brings some expertise to this, and I'm going to let him talk a little bit about some of the concepts that we, both at the stormwater level as well as kind of operating at the borough level, have begun to take on.
Thanks, Eric. What I wanted to touch on is how this project is very unique in the sense that we're calling it the Hanover model because really across the country, no one has done this approach before. It hasn't been what we call a community-based public-private partnership in which the assets and talent base of the municipal government or the borough in this case and the resources that we might have, partners up with the private sector that has the technology to be able to provide the services that we need. And really, our plan was, from the very beginning when we started crafting this, was finding a mechanism to leverage the program or the concept into generating an asset or using our assets to generate revenue to fund stormwater. This all started in 2020, quite honestly, with our wastewater team coming in saying, hey, we got capacity, let's bring in sewage sludge from communities and all. And we happened to know back in 2020 that these regulations were about to be promulgated from the EPA and the concern of emerging contaminants, which included PFAS, FOA, microplastics, endokinetic disruptors, antibiotics, all of those things that wastewater treatment plants cannot process are becoming major issues for the EPA. And of course, what comes from the EPA comes to the state, and what comes to the state, we get to do with no refunding, is usually the case. So they're unfunded mandates in many ways. So we started discussing what do we do and how do we get there. During that time, we also started discussing that all of our resources, whether it was stormwater, water, wastewater, they were all sort of siloed. And we started to develop the concept of what we're saying is one water concept, recognizing that all of our water is integrated, whether it's our reservoirs to our water treatment plant, and as Eric pointed out, our stormwater going to our wastewater plant, which we don't want. There's a lot of integration that happens with it. And of course, with that, you've got to protect your drinking water. Obviously, you have water that you take out of your treatment plant that could or could not maybe have PFAS in it. So we're discharging potentially contaminated water downstream to somebody else who then takes it out to use it for their drinking water. So there is this whole concept of interconnection with one water. So we started to look at how do we look at our water resources differently within our community, which is starting to guide a lot. And Eric is sort of the centerpiece of a lot of this. The other aspect is circular resource management. How do we recognize we have waste, but we also have wood waste and we have other things that could be usable resources to get us in there and to use as part of this process. So we started looking at how do we do a public-private partnership. When we say community-based, because Sean will get into this, there will be employees, people hired from the community. It is part of the community with the borough, and then the integration with water and so on. So you can see that the triangle there is sort of environmental sustainability, our economic opportunities with it, and regulatory compliance. And I will say again that this model has gathered quite a bit of interest. In fact, I was on a call today with folks from the UK about this concept. They're looking at some things as well. So this is kind of how we got here with the 20 years. So one of the questions, obviously, that a lot of people see is how would the revenue be used? Well, this project was tied to the Stormwater Authority so that the funds or the partnership with Earth Care, the revenues that are produced would be dedicated to the Stormwater Authority, who then can either use it directly for projects, or they can use those funds as part of matching grants, or they can use it as a debt service with low-interest loans and/or grant balance with PennVest, which is a state revolving fund for doing water, wastewater, and stormwater. So with that, when you see on the left there are the types of projects that the Stormwater Authority is already looking at doing, but really has no money to do. We're sort of at the mercy of sit and wait until a grant comes out.
The slide's a little bit bigger. It's, like,
No.
there's no way to read that. I'll be honest.
I'm glad you said that, because I've
And
been
I'm
thinking.
sitting in the front row. So.
It's a small screen.
Yeah.
I can read it. So, I mean, you're welcome to move up or come here and turn around and look that way. But the screen is as big as the screen is.
No, I wasn't talking about the screen.
I don't think you can't zoom it. Sorry.
Heidi, if you move, I moved up a little bit, it's a
Well, but
better.
that
It'll be
doesn't
available.
compare
We'll,
to the-
we'll make sure they are,
The
we'll make
information will be
sure they're
available.
available to be seen, part of the presentation.
You're more than welcome to move your chair up. I don't think they would
Again,
mind.
I'm not the only one, so
Well,
I'm trying to be aware of it.
okay,
I spoke up, but.
that's fine. So anyway, the bottom line is, at the $500,000 to 1.2 or better per year could equate to anywhere between $8 and $20 million of funding that we could get to do projects. And again, the funds are meant only for stormwater efforts. So with that, that is
Doesn't
the
include
intent.
Sewer water.
No, this is just, wastewater is still its own entity. They do everything they do, but then when the pile of biosolids is sitting there, or the digestate from the anaerobic digester, when that's usually picked up and leaves the property to be spread on farm fields, that is when it comes to Earth Care, and they process it right there, right at the facility. So there's no transport, there's no aspects to that. Now, I know you're gonna have a problem with that, but the bottom line is, and I'll put it out there, we were hoping for our 100-inch TV screens, but we couldn't get that. The bottom line is that just to do the downtown, based on our streetscape program, you're looking at $22 to $24 million, which is just, that's a large number. The square itself was about 9 to 10 million to do that. So essentially, that's a very difficult amount of money to try to get to fix things that we get 1.4 million a year and haven't changed the stormwater fees since its inception. So this is an opportunity to be able to do that. And these numbers are from 2024, so we know with escalation and everything, those are higher. The other aspect is essentially the whole issue related to PFAS that Mr. Holt brought up, and it's been a big focus for us. Again, this started in 2020 in this conversation. PFAS comes from many things. It comes from your utensils, it comes from packaging, it's in your clothes, it's fire foam, which we've transitioned from, so we don't have that anymore. It's in stormwater. We do have PFAS in our biosolids. We do not have PFAS in our water because of how we get our water. So we're good on that front. So this is where EPA has passed regulations for drinking water. They are in the process of looking at having regulations for what they call the destruction and disposal of PFAS media, basically biosolids, stormwater, or other things stormwater media that may have PFAS in it. How do you dispose of it, and where do you dispose of it? Those regulations are out on public review right now and in process of being potentially passed. With this, a lot of people say, well, how does biosolids, and hopefully you're seeing the picture, how does biosolids tie to stormwater? Well, as Eric pointed out, we spread it somewhere. So it ends up in somebody's water somewhere, somebody's soil, somebody's water, and therefore it's tied there. There's PFAS in stormwater coming in off of roads and packaging goods and things that are in our system. So it's pretty much everywhere, which makes it very difficult to control and deal with. And of course, we have PFAS coming in from industry, any of the business, hospitals. Everything has it. They're trying to get it out of the system, but as has been stated, it's a forever chemical. It's very, very difficult to get rid of. And Pennsylvania is now starting to move into this process of saying, we got to look at this. This is a bill that's being considered right now for 2025 that basically will, request DEP to study PFAS chemicals and biosolids that are being spread on farm fields, which is what we do now. And their concern is contamination of soil, water, and more importantly, testing to see how that might affect crops, how it might affect livestock, chickens, things that then consume the feed and everything, and then we end up consuming it. So it gets into our food supply. So the state is going to be requesting a study by DEP to look at how biosolids is affecting our current agricultural systems. And ultimately, they will be looking at likely, and there's been conversation of this for a couple of years now, eliminating the ability to spread biosolids on farm fields. The only other thing that you can do at that point is incineration, gasification, or landfilling.
Does
And
that just not move it into the air?
no.
Oh, okay.
Landfilling, which there is not enough landfill space. Incinerator is the main thing for municipal waste, so there aren't any incinerators for biosolids. So with that, this is how we've come to this solution of working with EarthCare and how that would work with the biosolids and ultimately the revenue streams that we have that we would then use for stormwater.
Thank you, Chuck. Good evening, everybody. My name's Sean Sweeney. I'm Executive Vice President with EarthCare Solutions. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with everybody a little bit about our process, our system, and having the opportunity to partner with the borough. I'll just touch on kind of what we do, what kind of is unique here, and give you some examples of another facility that we have that is a very good example of exactly what we would be doing here and the service that we'd be providing the community. So EarthCare is an organics management business. We have a patented gasification process that takes in organic materials, dries them, and then carbonizes the carbon to a biochar or a biocarbon for beneficial use. We can process municipal biosolids, green waste, pretty much anything organic. And that gives us some interesting opportunities. As Chuck mentioned, obviously there's concerns about emerging contaminants, PFAS, microplastics, pharmaceuticals, things like that. Unique to the thermal treatment realm of treatment of organics, unlike composting or something like that, certainly not like land application. The high heat process breaks down those compounds and destroys those so that we have no measurable PFAS in the resulting biochar and biocarbons. And we've been able to prove that on a regular basis with one of our existing facilities utilizing EPA methods for measurement. The output of the carbonization system, as I mentioned, is biochar. We also make heat. That heat is used for drying the inbound material so that it can go through the carbonization process. If we have excess heat, that can be used to generate power, electrical power, or in the case of what we're discussing here, co-locating with the DPW facility, providing space heating in the winter, things like that. Additionally, because this is a carbon negative process, when the resulting biochar and biocarbons are sequestered either in soil or in this case in concrete, green concrete, voluntary carbon credits are generated. So we get to take advantage of that carbon negative process. And I think one of the key factors here that makes this opportunity unique with the borough is revenue. Obviously, we have the ability as a merchant facility to bring in tipping fees for processing other communities' materials. That brings in revenue to the facility. We have our product sales, so we sell our biochar and our biocarbons, and we also sell the carbon credits as well. And then we partner with the borough on that with a revenue sharing opportunity. So on the process itself, as noted in EPA's draft guidance with regard to addressing those emerging contaminants, high temperature thermal processing or carbonization is one of the recognized methods of dealing with these contaminants. It is not combustion. I want to make that very clear to everybody. You can see kind of on the graph up there, you can see pyrolysis on the lower left-hand side, lower heat, no oxygen. And as you kind of climb up, you get into the gasification space and then ultimately into combustion with higher heat, but then also higher oxygen. We're right above that pyrolysis point here,
because our purpose is to get hot enough to destroy those contaminants, but not so hot that, and not add so much oxygen that we burn up our product, which is the biochar, or that carbon.
It's like coking it.
It is similar process, yeah.
Roasting.
Yep, we're roasting it. We're driving off the volatile fraction. We use that, we call that syngas, and we use that in a high heat burner to create hot air that drives our drying process. And then we reserve or contain that carbon material. It actually pushes off all the oxygen and hydrogen on that carbon. The carbon double bonds, makes itself very durable. And then that's our biochar, our biocarbon resulting product, very much like granule activated carbon. We kind of touched on this a little bit. In this specific case, the organics that we would be processing are biosolids, along with urban wood waste and green waste. The borough has quite a bit of that as well. So that's an opportunity to bring those two together and provide a management strategy both for the borough and for surrounding communities as well. What is biochar or biocarbons? They are that carbon fraction. They're a rich carbon solid product. There's a couple of examples over at the end of the table, and I have some here. This is a product that we make currently from one of our facilities. We have a number of facilities throughout the country that are using various organic feedstocks to make biochars. It's very stable, and it's basically that carbon double bonds on itself once you push all the volatiles off of it, including the hydrogen, oxygen. And you can measure the quality of that. We continuously measure the quality of our products. Not all chars are equal. That's important to know because you may hear of biochars and you see a lot of biochars related to wood. A good product, but a very different product. That only has carbon in it. In our case, we also have some beneficial minerals. That's why our chars are more favored for the green concrete industry, for example. But your feedstocks do impact your chars, and you need to understand how to use those chars and for the best application. That's one thing that's unique about Earth Care Solutions is that we're not just selling equipment. We actually build, own, operate, and maintain them ourselves. We market the end products ourselves. We manage the feedstock sourcing process ourselves so that we can create the end products that we want and that our customers want. So I wanted to give you an example. We have a facility in Bethel, Pennsylvania, very similar. It's a 2-module facility. We can process up to 60,000 wet tons a year of biosolids, and we will make about 7,000 tons of biochar each year. That's a very similar process because in the same way that we would be here, Bethel was designed, built, owned, and operated by Earth Care and financed privately as well. So very, very similar process, and I wanted to share some of the pictures so you have an idea of what our facility there looks like and what a facility here would look like as well. Here's pictures of our building. It's a pre-engineered metal building, very similar to any other agricultural building that you might see anywhere. Everything's contained within the facility. You can kind of see that here. There's 2 process trains at their Bethel facility. You can see some of our equipment, our gasifiers, thermal oxidizers, our blend chambers, and some of our augers. Very similar process would be here at the facility serving the borough as well. Here's a picture of our dryers. That's where the wet feedstock comes in, and we dry it down for preparation to go into the carbonization or the gasification system. Some more pictures of that and how that connects. You can see our thermal oxidizers or our syngas reactors that bring that hot air into the dryer, and that's what drives the process. We're utilizing that energy, the volatile energy in the feedstock to significantly reduce our fossil fuel usage. So once the system is hot and running and we're making syngas, our fossil fuel usage goes practically to nothing, and that's why we can be a very carbon negative process.
Do you ever produce any to sell back?
To sell back to,
Gas company?
Yeah, it's not
The
that
syngas
kind.
itself? No, we use all our syngas. Yeah, we use all our syngas. We do turn it into heat, and in some cases generate power with that heat, but we're not selling that syngas. Here's some outside equipment. You can get an idea. End of the process, we have a biofilter to scrub any residual odors. I think it's important to note that the entire system is contained. All that air from the facility, including receiving, goes through the process, goes through the scrubbers, and ultimately through the biofilter to ensure we don't have any excess odors releasing or coming off of the facility. Here's some pictures. Typically, our biochar is loaded into super sacks, and those super sacks go out to our customers for their use. So this gives you an idea. We've been working with Eric and council and the solid waste, or the Stormwater Authority for a while here, and kind of identified a site along Cougar Drive, an industrial zoned area that the borough owns that kind of works very well to be a future site of the DPW facility, and we can co-locate with you there and create some advantages. So it gives you an idea, again, an industrial site surrounded by industrial other end users on all sides there. This is just a picture of kind of our facility. The facility itself is about 30,000 square feet. We have everything contained within the facility and kind of tucked in on that site. Like I said, it will be the future site of your DPW complex, so we're tying in there, and any excess energy that we have can be shared on site with the DPW facility. It is in zoned industrial. All the utilities are already there. We do need three-phase electric. We don't use very much water, even though your public water system is there. This is the old site of the old wastewater treatment plant. The only fresh water we use is really for the bathrooms and for our char cooling process that uses about a liter a minute. And then we do use some natural gas for startup of the units, like I discussed. But we're all integrated at the facility there. We'll have about 10 trucks a day, so very low truck count. You'll actually have more trucks coming in and out through your DPW operations than you will from this facility. This is just a rendering of the facility itself. You can see it looks very similar to our other site at Bethel. You can see everything contained there, and we have another area here on the top of the page that's where we'll store all our finished biochar as it's heading out. At the moment, rough CapEx estimates about $34 million. Again, EarthCare will finance all of that through state revolving funds. One reason why this is so unique is the borough, through your One Water infrastructure system, you're servicing a lot of communities around you, and that gives us a unique opportunity to team with the borough and provide those services and also access lower interest state revolving fund financing opportunities. I mentioned it before, the facility is entirely enclosed under negative air, so that allows us to grab any odors and run it through the process. It would be a 2-module facility to start out. When we say 2 modules, that's 2 gasifier lines. We will store our biochar inside here. We do have air scrubbers. You can see those kind of on the outside, and I mentioned the biofilter before, and we did talk about any excess heat. If we don't use it for drying purposes, we can make power or provide some space heating opportunities. So kind of a little bit about project assumptions and the P3 model. I'd mentioned that before, that we'd be able to do about 60,000 wet tons a year maximum with 2 modules. We'd have the ability to expand if we can find the feedstocks and it makes sense. We will be located at that old wastewater treatment plant site. And I think this is important, looking at the roles and responsibilities. Really, the risk lies with EarthCare Solutions. We'll be responsible for designing, building, financing the facility, operating the facility, finding the feedstocks. All of that falls under our zone of responsibility. We will have state permits that require us to have insurance and bonding guarantees. I think that was referenced before. What happens if if Earth Care solution goes away, we are required to be bonded through the state. Through that process, we also have multiple plans for protection of the facility, making sure we don't have spills or emissions from the facility. And we will also have various financial insurance instruments, project completion and revenue shortfall insurance through Aon. That's a requirement of the Penvest State Revolving Funds. What that means is it protects both Penvest and the borough from any type of financial liability. That lies with us to pay. We pay that insurance policy, and if there was a problem, the insurance company pays out on that insurance policy. On the borough side, your responsibilities, obviously you've been helping us out, providing a site, providing some oversight. We'll have transparency on operations and financing. There's no financial guarantees. There's no OpEx responsibilities.
What does OpEx mean?
Operating expenses. So we bear all of those, Earth Care bears all of those responsibilities. The revenue sharing potential or opportunity here really comes out of the fact that because you service multiple other communities, we can access lower interest financing opportunities, and then we can pass some of that savings onto the borough through, for lease, revenue sharing, et cetera, to fund your green infrastructure programs like Eric and Chuck discussed. So we have our tipping fees, we have our biochar sales, we have our carbon credit sales, and we will be able to share revenue with the borough, which is a very unique structure. That's many other communities are installing similar systems. However, those systems are specifically set up oftentimes with their wastewater treatment plant, so they have to pay for those systems. The cost of the CapEx, the OpEx of those systems are all borne by the ratepayers, which increases their costs. In this case, because of this unique P3 opportunity, we actually get to share revenue with the borough. Predicted long-term, some of the benefits to the borough, obviously, as Chuck and Eric mentioned, there's predictable long-term revenue streams. So if we are annually providing $500,000 to $1 million a year to the Stormwater Authority, you are able to then use that, leverage that to borrow additional funds to fund your infrastructure programs. It also allows you to do those things with no new taxes or fees required. We've been talking earlier before the meeting, and so far you've been fortunate to not have to raise stormwater fees, even though costs continue to increase. Somewhere along the line, there has to be additional revenues to cover those additional costs. This is an opportunity to do that, fill that gap without increasing taxes. Creates local jobs. We'll create about 15 new local jobs, create additional tax base within the communities. We'll give you reduced disposal costs on the biosolids from your wastewater treatment plant and give you kind of known costs going forward. In the last 3 years, costs of biosolids generally in the region have doubled in management, and we're seeing that ever increasing. As Chuck mentioned, as restrictions continue, many states have outlawed the land application of biosolids completely. They have seen extreme increases in biosolids disposal costs. Maine is above $200 a ton. That would be a significant shock to the ratepayers. Public benefit, private innovation, we're reducing environmental risk, protecting the Chesapeake Bay through ensuring that those biosolids are not going on the land. We're processing them, we're destroying those emerging contaminants and creating a product that doesn't have PFAS in it anymore. And we're really helping the borough future-proof your facilities, your infrastructure, providing some really resilience to your systems and your budgets. So kind of next steps. The first couple here, we're kind of operating in parallel. We've been talking to council for quite a while now. We're in the process of design and permitting the facility. It allows us to finalize costing and our financial package to Penvest, and in turn allows us to work with the borough to finalize agreements and be able to move final pieces forward. We're hoping to be able to finance the project this year and potentially move into construction either later this year or early next year, with operations hopefully next year. So this is kind of a preliminary schedule. You can see that opportunities looking to finance it this summer, hopefully finish the permitting and finalize agreements this summer, and move into construction and get into operations and start saving the borough money in mid next year.
So you're saying it's a year once it's approved by the council, essentially?
Roughly. I mean, we have lead times on equipment
Yeah.
that we can't really expedite. So yes, it's about a year.
Pretty
Yep.
aggressive.
Yep. The one opportunity, because we're modularized in process, it does allow us to have the exact same equipment at every single site. So it's not a one-off design, and we can go to our suppliers and expedite that a little bit. That's why we can do it in a year, but we unfortunately can't do it any faster than that.
Electronics.
Yeah, most of it is electric. So that
Which one? Electric?
the electrical components are the usual long lead time items. So that concludes what I have. Very open to answering any questions that anybody might have.
Okay, yeah, just for moderation purposes and clarification for those of you in attendance, we're going to handle staff and committee questions first, and then I'm going to open it up for questions of the presenters after that concludes, during what would be our second public comment portion of the meeting. So,
Bill, pull that microphone up closer.
oh, sorry. Brian, any questions?
I do have just a few questions for you. So, interestingly enough, right, the timing worked out that we just council recently approved the new solid waste management contract earlier this year. And in that report that they put forward to council, they said the borough generates 2,400 wet tons annually. And you're saying daily you're processing 60,000.
That would be annually. We
Annually,
have the capacity, yes.
Okay, so I guess my question really comes down to like the feedstock. So you already have all of those LOIs and those contracts set up. You're
We will.
pretty well
Yes. Yep.
at capacity with what you're initially
We
said.
won't be at capacity, so we won't be contracting all of that material. We want to leave some of it for kind of a spot market opportunity. That really allows us to potentially generate some more revenue for the facility and share that with the borough. But we do need to lock in enough LOIs to show financing through Penvest, that we have contracts and revenue streams that make the project financeable.
Sure. And how wide is that service area? Because we don't have a lot of chicken farms down here, and we don't have a lot of that type of feedstock.
Yeah, that was specific to our Bethel facility.
Sure.
Here, the feedstocks will be biosolids and wood wastes. And generally, what's fairly typical is an hour or two drive time from a facility is generally what I'll call the waste shed for that facility, where we would be cost effective for folks to be, generators to be bringing, haulers to be bringing those materials to our facility.
I mean, you got Penn Township, you got Gettysburg, and even contracts with the waste disposal companies. That's the one thing that's
That's
really.
what we do.
That's what they do. They actually work with the
That's
waste
our
disposal. They're not trying to take contracts away.
No.
They're working with them and saying, hey, this is a better deal to come here rather than driving 2 hours away and land
Like
disposal.
a septic tank pumper.
Think of Denali, think of Casella, I don't know if you have those folks, maybe Waste Management. They're all haulers of biosolids. We partner with them, we provide them a resource for alternative management of those materials. They provide us an LOI and the resources, the feedstocks, and then that's how we bring all the pieces together.
How
So
might Spring Grove Well, I don't, Bill, you would know better than I do, the wood chip.
I'm sorry, we're trying to keep it to just the
I'm
committee
sorry,
and
go
staff.
ahead.
Sorry, you're up, you're coming.
You're next.
I mean, to his point, though, like pixel and that stuff, that's also the feedstock. And that's sort of your niche, right? Controlling that feedstock to get your biochar product at the end.
Yep.
Because like you stated, right, there's other players in the field.
Yep.
Like Eco Remedy, I think they recently, in 2019, put in a facility in Morrisville. or-
Oh, they
well,
did,
just did
yeah.
one in
That one's
Morrisville.
not there anymore, but they have one in Washington State,
Yeah.
and they'll be building one in Derry Township.
But just
Yeah,
wanna make
dairy,
sure
and
that
then
we don't-
Ephrata has one. It's a different technology.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think dairy's right, the digester though, right? It's not the
It's a
same.
combo.
No,
I
they
think
they
it's a
have
combo.
they'll be building a thermal processing facility as well.
Okay.
The other thing too is we have way more wood waste. You know, we got wood waste from, what we're not even using in our reservoir from the sustainable wood, sustainable forestry.
That's
So we
why,
have that.
that's why the borough is so unique, because you have so much infrastructure that other wastewater treatment plants don't have. They are just a wastewater treatment plant. You've got both maybe a larger footprint, maybe slightly larger problems, but a lot more opportunity too, and that's why this is so unique.
Brian, just to springboard, I know, if you have more questions, I'll come back, but the door's open for my segue into the question.
Yep.
What percentage with your two modules or units operating, what percentage of your original model will be borough waste, if you will?
Couple percent.
Yeah, less than 10%.
Less than
Yeah,
10%.
yeah.
Okay.
The
There's a lot of
opportunity,
capacity.
the opportunity there is everything that we bring out in outside of the borough is revenue. Like, obviously, we're not making revenue on the borough's material. But when we provide that service to outside communities, now that's revenue that, the borough shares.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was my question
I thought
about
you
your
might go there.
LOIs. I wanted that,
Yes.
because we're a low percentage of what your.
That's correct.
Very
business
low.
model
Yeah,
is.
we're not making money on borough material.
Right.
We're looking to provide that service with the borough to the region. And then because you are a partner, you get the benefits of that.
And the reason we did that, we could have very easily gone and done what Ephrata did. Put in a unit just sized to deal with what they have. But Ephrata has no room in their facility area. They could not even, they looked at the earth care facility, right? But their volume was so big, so small, and the space was limited, that it didn't make sense. And because it's being capitalized or paid for by the ratepayers, they went with a small system. We had assets that were laying idle, not really doing anything, that would work because all the infrastructure was already there. And we had the ability to do it in a manner that was very unique and different than other communities that would allow us to actually make revenue off of an asset we have. So that was the whole focus on how this was put together.
Yeah, I think it's great that you're incorporating it into our Public Works future campus site. Speaking of the infrastructure being there, how comes you're choosing to come off of, I think that's what, like Jefferson or something like, it's not an extension of Cougar Drive or Jaguar Drive?
We'll let Eric answer that one.
So Cougar Drive was actually, Conewago Township took that right-of-way and split it and let the two adjacent property owners have rights to that. So there is no more right-of-way there. We might be able to engage in a conversation with them. I mean, if you go out there now, there's like pallets and some stuff there, so it's nothing like, nobody's built a building there or anything, but they did give those ownership rights to those two adjacents, unfortunately.
The one benefit of Jefferson is that you've got industrial, commercial, we're behind all those industrial, commercial facilities, and then on the other side is the concrete plant and the factory. So you're kind of sandwiched in between a bunch of commercial and industrial, and we're kind of hidden back there.
Yeah, and I mean, the concrete plant comes in and out of that facility.
Yeah, they
utilized.
use it
There's no
occasionally.
issue with the road or anything like that. All the infrastructure's good.
Yeah, and that's actually a borough-owned, it's not necessarily a public thoroughfare. It is owned by the borough, but solely it's really access for our facilities at the rear of that, although some of those other ones will use it from the side, like Precision Cuts and I think some of the lumber yard and those others.
Okay.
Where are you referring to?
South Jefferson off Bletner. It parallels Ram Drive.
Yeah, I believe that was all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
In the original model, and I believe we're all assuming that this will grow, but 2 units or 2 modules, sorry, whichever term you like, that eventually, do they grow by 2s?
They don't have to, they could grow by 1. So each module, each train is functionally the same, same capacity, same supporting infrastructure. That's really going to be a function of, as we get up and going, and we found this in our
The
Bethel
market brings us.
facility, it's the feedstock market.
Yep.
What's the economics of those haulers bringing material to us? And as those markets change, things get more expensive, like Maryland's looking at a ban on land application. As that market changes, it becomes more economical to come from a farther distance. Really, that's driven by the haulers and the costs that they have.
Okay. And as it grows, what does our agreement, our business model, if you will, we, the borough, have a role in the decision-making process to grow? We're not just giving you the keys and saying,
Yes, so part of that transparency and oversight component, it is a partnership, and you have input, because it's your property. We're leasing it from you. So there's not carte blanche for us to do anything that we want to do. You have a stake in that discussion.
So are we a shareholder? How does the shareholding work?
No,
we're a
it's not
landowner.
a share, yeah, it's not a shareholder per se. We have to, Earthcare needs to own and operate it itself so that
finance.
and finance it so that the borough has no financial liability. But we manage that through our site agreement and our other revenue sharing agreements.
getting back to the economics, sorry, I just jotted things down as they came to me here. The economics for us on the profitability, if you will, the 500,000 to 1.2 million.
Yep.
That does not model in or include any of our waste savings, if you will.
No, it does not.
Okay, so it only gets better when we calculate that.
Correct. It also doesn't include any opportunities to share heat and space heating if we have excess heat. It doesn't include any of that. That is just the pro forma as it stands now for the base carbonization system. That's it.
Yeah, as those look at the economics.
The
of this,
LOIs,
that's-
the drivers of the LOIs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
We're
a higher
finalizing our
return.
LOIs, we're finalizing our CapEx costs.
Right.
We will pull that together, work with the borough. We'll ultimately be making an application for SRF funds with Penvest, and then that will ultimately, once they give us all their details on the financing package, that will finalize what the whole revenue and cost stream looks like. And then, obviously, that's open book, and we'll share that with you and how that moves forward.
Okay. Some of those ancillary benefits, the carbon negative credit that you referred to.
Yep. How's that work?
Are we sharing, now I understand how it works. Are we sharing those, or are those yours to sell, or?
So it's
How
part
do
of
we-
the revenue portfolio.
Okay.
Generally, what makes the product of great interest to our customers is that there is a carbon negative attribute to the product itself. The product itself, I'll give you an example as a concrete admixture. The carbon in the biochar sequesters carbon, obviously. It acts as a lightweight aggregate, so it holds water and then releases it after initial hydration. The minerals have a beneficial impact on that concrete material. But what really makes it of interest to them is all those things in combination along with that carbon negative attribute, because that's how they brand and market their end product to their customers. So generally, we either tie that to the product that we're selling, and those folks are buying that that carbon attribute as well, or we'll separate those. We'll go through an auditing process. Our Riverview, Indiana facility was the first facility that sold voluntary carbon credits from biochar derived from manure. That was sold on the Puro Earth platform. We're doing the same thing with Bethel. So in that case, we go through an auditing process, we create our carbon dioxide removal credits, and then we put those on that platform and they're sold to the highest bidder.
Okay, so I think that was more to my question, but you took me to an area where I may have a follow-up question, because that
Shoot.
interests me. You put me to mind of the air pollution credits, if you will, that go back to the 70s.
Yep.
As far as companies could purchase those to
Yep.
clean up their acts rather than putting equipment in. So there is that side of it, that traditional environmental credit concept, if you will, in addition to the ancillary benefit of the actual biochar material having an affinity for carbon.
That's correct. We can either maintain that carbon attribute with the product and kind of on paper sell all of those attributes together, or those can be split. The only difference between the air, pollution credits is those were more regulatory driven, whereas this is a voluntary market. But it's the same concept. It's an audited process, and then that attribute is brought forward on a platform and then sold.
Do we see it, regulatory climate evolving that way into?
Not at the moment.
No, okay.
More the private sector
Yes.
is driving the market, not governments.
Yeah, they're playing
So
catch-up.
there couldn't be
Well,
administrative
they're not even
change
playing
issues.
catch up. They're going in a
Yeah,
different
and-
direction. But private sector, like the Microsofts, the Googles, they're the ones that are the biggest buyer of
Yes.
those kind of credits. And the other thing that with the carbon credits, we've also had preliminary conversations with DEP about nutrient credits. We get nutrient credits for our wastewater plant for nitrogen and stuff. Biosolids is looked at as a manure, right? So by taking them off the field and doing something with them, and we are in fact taking nutrients off the field in the Chesapeake Bay. So while it hasn't been totally approved in that process, there's opportunity that it could be approved. Even though we are going volume reduction on stormwater, it's not like the pollutants are going away. The concept is if we reduce the runoff, most of your pollutants are in the first flush. So you're kind of getting the pollutants when you do the storage or infiltration. But that doesn't happen with biosolids. So there still could be opportunity for nutrient credits associated with the Chesapeake Bay from it. No promises, that would just be icing.
It would make sense. I mean, will they do something that makes sense is the question.
That is a
How
challenge.
does it change
Sure.
administration by?
That could be. So
We're not banking, that has not been figured into any of this.
It only gets better.
It
if
only
I
gets better,
understand
that's
it. Yeah,
correct.
exactly.
Could get better.
All right, I'm going to continue. Solicitor Soltis, did you have any questions?
I don't.
You're on the panel. I'll continue this way. You guys, anything? Okay. I'll open this up for, firstly, we have a post presentation address of of the Stormwater Authority, and I'll ask Mr. Holt to come back up. You wanted to speak twice?
There's still some questions that just, because one of the elementary things you learned in middle school is all matter is permanent. It doesn't get permanently destroyed. And the way the world works, it's either a liquid, a solid, or a gas. And when you destroy or break down the solid, it becomes a gas or a liquid. When you freeze the liquid, it becomes a solid, but no matter goes away. And there's really been no firm explanation about what happens to the chemicals that we're trying to address here, the big driver. What happens to those? They're rendered inert, but they never really go away. And the question is, what is the long-term impact as that material breaks down over time? What is the long-term impact? And as I read, nobody really has an answer about, what are the long-term impacts as this material degrades? And again, there's no discussion about how tall is this facility? How many feet? How long is it? I mean, and is there going to be a water moisture catchment system underneath of it so that when some water runs, it rains, it's going to fall on the site like every place else around here? Is there a system underneath of this facility in the soil underneath that's going to catch any water that might come out of the the facility and run it through a filtration system, or is it just gonna seep in the soil and go into the groundwater? And, this site already has environmental issues, and I can just see someday we go and file a claim with the insurance companies and the bonding companies. Well, you know what they're gonna do, as I've seen over and over again, they're gonna lawyer up, and then there's gonna be this big legal fight about whether the contaminants were from there before the facility was built, or was the contaminants the result of the facility itself? And, well, that's how it works. And I still don't know why we haven't looked at other sites in the scoping. We have a landfill over in one area, we have some other sites. I'm not trying to fend that off, push that off on some other community.
That's easy.
But I just don't know why we're shoving all of this in Conewago Township. This is the second attempt to cite this in Conewago Township. And I just keep thinking about, we only need to treat about 10% of the capacity. So we'll be trucking in 90% from other communities, and we're bringing other communities' problems here. And then we assume those issues, they become ours permanently forever. And if whatever comes with it, it's ours. But those other communities, they paid a fee and it's off their backs. It's no longer their headache. The last thing is, the way I understand is the Environmental Protection Agency says that nobody is permanently mitigated from liability if there's an issue down the road. Even if you didn't own the land when the problem comes, if you bought the land after years later, you assume the liability with the land. And so nobody has a pass on the liability. You may have it on paper, but the way the federal government works and some state agencies work, it doesn't matter what you have on paper, it's what the law says. And that law says you can't get a pass on the liability if you have any legal or ownership connection to it. I just think there's a lot of questions we need to answer before we go down this path. I mean, even the Department of Environmental Protection has argued amongst themselves about where should this fall within the regulatory scheme. Should it be a water issue or should it be an air issue? And they can't even decide. When DEP looks at this facility, you're going to be going through two processes, the soil, water, and the air quality. And so the other thing we haven't heard tonight is this works on a pressurized system. And what happens when the facility loses pressure? Where does the air go? What is the odor like? How many miles downrange? I mean, folks who been around here longer than me say it always wasn't a good situation when the wind blew this direction from Spring Grove. And so I just think there's a lot of questions that we just need to answer, and we should take some time. I'm not saying don't do it, I'm just saying let's really fully understand what we're getting into before we do this, because the money sounds great, and I understand about the EPA and tightening the standards, and I mean, once upon a time, they talked about parts per million. Well, that was like water coming out of your hose. And then they started talking about parts per billion. Well, the flow is like coming out of a shower head. Now they're talking about regulating items at parts per trillion. And that's like a trickle out of like a little fountain, a decorative fountain. I mean, the standards get tighter and tighter, and it gets more expensive to do that. I mean, they've picked out the low-hanging fruit on the regulatory scheme of mitigating contaminants and pollution, and so it's going to get just more and more expensive, but we really need to look at
our
what
expense.
we're getting into, and again, thanks.
Okay, I have,
Do you want,
Yeah.
Sean to
I'm
respond?
going to get through the second public comment first, and then we
Oh,
can come
okay,
back with
because that
this,
was
maybe try and
a
summarize.
lot contained in that bucket.
Questions. Brian, I can't read that second letter.
Neely,
Neely, okay.
my last name. My question is, in your presentation, it was very positive. All positivity. No project has zero downsides. What are the downsides? What budgetary concerns? Where does this funding actually come from? Because given a federal administration that's actively hostile to environmental processes, and demanding that states and private companies sort of follow their lead or lead them that direction, if that funding dries up and you've got the building half built, what are we left with? I don't know much about this field, so I don't know what other challenges you might face, but I'd like to hear something about the problems that you have looked at, that you've studied, and that you have a plan for, or recognize that you might not be able to plan for them.
Yep, okay, absolutely.
That was an easier
we-
one.
All right, so.
Start with that one.
I don't need to stand up here.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So, the one great point about the public-private partnership is those challenges become our challenges and not the borough's challenges. With any process, obviously, building any project, there's many things that you're balancing at the same time. In this specific scenario, funding is always something that you have to consider. What we've strived to do is not be beholden or have exposure to changes of administration one way or another. We look to ensure that the project works financially on its own and can pass muster for either private financing or, in this case, state revolving funds that act like private financing because we have to guarantee the loan. Now, how do we guarantee the loan? Well, we still have a portion. We got to bring 20% equity skin in the game to even get to the financing component. And then, in this case, we have insurance policies that we have to pay for to ensure that the rest of it, that we will not, if something happens, that Penvest is made whole. The bonding, for example, does the same thing for the site. There was, Mr. Holt had a number of components in his comments. Challenges, those become our issues. We need to manage feedstocks. We need to manage the sale of our products. We need to manage that financing. We need to manage our staff. All of those things are challenges or things that we take on, and because we have prior experience with that, we get somewhat of a unique opportunity to say, hey, we have an exact example of that. I would invite folks, if they're interested, we can certainly set up a visit to our other facilities so you can really get an idea of what that is. But those are the things that are often kind of risks on our end that we have to manage through a project.
Well, inflation.
Okay, I also have,
Building materials.
Mr. Sears just came up, and what's your first name?
Dashel.
Dashel, I thought so, but your penmanship is better than mine, but mine's not good.
Oh, mine's bad.
Okay, Mr. Sears.
So, very important questions, and I'm gonna be just softball questions.
Okay.
Would you be committed to hiring from the community? And this is a lot of great science, not only just the science itself, but also the way the partnerships work. As far as the community benefit, would you be open to an educational component with our local schools?
We talked about that,
yeah.
Not only for how the process works as far as the science, but also how civic partnerships work.
Yeah, that would be a great idea. That's excellent.
We did talk about training, education, because there'll be a lot of other municipal governments interested, so them having to come in, so yeah, I mean, it's a great
Can
opportunity.
it be prioritized?
Yes.
All right.
Well, of course, yeah.
And I imagine there's some biochar that could go to local schools potentially to
Yeah.
make awareness. I feel it's safe to say most people walked in here and had maybe not even heard biochar. and it is going to be something that you will hear about. So, at a pretty steady rate over the next period of years as this technology emerges.
Do you want to address additional comments? I know Robert had a lot, building height,
Yeah.
water.
Yeah, you showed a
management issues.
representation. Let's come back and address that one. I mean, it looked to me like something that's probably 30, 40 feet tall-ish. Just-
Yeah, so to eave height, we're about 30, generally about 32 feet at the eaves. I believe that the manufacturing facility next door is taller than that. That's roughly, the height we need to get all of our equipment in there and give us room to maintain it in the future. This is our Bethel site. We're about 30, 32 feet at the eaves and about 50 or 55 at the ridge.
What was your length and width? Of
In this case, I think we're about 120 feet long.
Like
if I'm-
about 200.
And
250.
in this case, we would be a little bit longer. I want to try to, we'd probably be about 225 or so. I don't have the exact number. Along that long edge, because we have that second bay for storage, and we're about 120 or so on the main processing building. And then you have receiving. One point here that we have that we're doing a little bit different than Bethel is the receiving area is completely contained and it's a drive-through, so there's no backing actions by the trucks. They just drive through, dump their loads completely contained. That goes up to a surge hopper, and then the truck goes out the other door.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
You have your own permitting and stuff that you have to comply with. I
Yes.
assume you'll have a pollutant protection plan.
Yep.
There's a containment facility, I would imagine, that's part of where the discharge is when they drive into the facility.
It's all concrete.
self-
Yes, everything is concrete lined, everything, once the truck comes into the building, the material is both contained within the concrete and the confines of the building, but then also the equipment within the building. It basically goes into a steel container from the moment it's dropped in there, through surge hoppers, through enclosed augers, through the drum dryer that's enclosed, through solid separation and into the gasification system. All of that is enclosed. It doesn't come out of an enclosed system until it's cooled, and then actually it goes into super sack, so it's enclosed again. Really, from the point it comes into the facility, the whole way to bagging, the material is enclosed through the entire facility. And then air that comes into the facility, there's a question about odors. Again, I invite folks to visit us at our other facility. Because we use so much process air to move material, all of that comes, it's prioritized that our fresh air comes in through the receiving area. Any odors in that receiving area gets pulled through the process and gets into our blend chamber. And then that goes through our dryer, what ultimately goes through our scrubbers and our biofilter. So all of that air is pulled into the process and then treated. And that allows us to very tightly contain odors. But if you came to another facility, you would not smell anything outside the building.
Sean, do you have the address in your head? I know when you build things, sometimes it's there. Of the Bethel facility.
Oh,
I
yeah.
wanted to put it out there, anyone who potentially wanted to go on a downwind day, I mean,
Yep.
don't just go tour the plant, but go
Yep, it's 820 Schubert Road. Bethel,
820
P.
Schubert Road, Bethel, PA.
Yeah.
And that is in what
You
county?
Google it, it'll show
Berks
it.
County,
Berks County.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
it'll show
We'll
it.
get you
Please
the address.
reach
if you'd like
out
to see it.
to me, we'll show you around.
And the thing about the water, I mean, it is all recycled from the biofilter. The water comes out because they're spraying water. They're using that. And then the little bit of water they use for potable water is for sinks and toilets and stuff. But from the stormwater aspect, there will be a stormwater pond. But because everything is inside the building, it's basically going to be water coming off the area that's there already.
Yes.
There's no infiltration of water to it.
Yeah, it's on a pad.
All the
It's on the
material is
pad.
contained through all of these metal components the whole way through the process. We're not putting it outside on the ground anywhere.
And the silos and the equipment that were outside of the facility, that's the biochar, that's the end product storage? What's in those?
These are scrubbers,
Those
they're
are
for
the
air
scrubbers.
treatment.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about the PFAS destruction process?
About how it's destroyed? Okay, so there was a
Because there's
question
different
about.
components of it.
Yeah, there was a question about PFAS and how It's not about changing phase. While when the material comes in, let me see if I can get a good picture of the gasifier, and I don't think I can't really point. There's a gasifier in the left picture, kind of center. There's a blue fan above it. Basically, what happens is we dry material through the drum dryer. It comes in about 15% moisture into the carbonization or the gasification system. That is a high heat, low oxygen, extremely low oxygen environment. So it can't burn because there's no oxygen there. But because of the high heat, the volatile fractions come off of the base carbon. At the temperatures we operate at, it volatilizes PFAS and other contaminants off of the base carbon. That goes into our syngas. And then that syngas goes up into our syngas reactor that is combusted at very high temperature, 1,800 to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And that mineralizes or reduces. It's not a phase reaction, it is a chemical reaction. Those compounds are broken apart and reduced through that process. And then obviously that air goes through the scrubbing system.
And then to the biofilter.
To the scrubbers and to the biofilter. So that high heat in the syngas reactor is really where that destruction happens. It's not in the gasification system itself. The gasification system is meant to separate the volatiles off the base carbon. We also push the hydrogen and oxygen off, and then that makes the carbon double bond on itself and create that very durable carbon product.
Is that biofilter at that point, when it's spent or taken out of service for you, is that considered hazardous waste?
No, the great part about that is because it's wood, we can bring that material right back to the head of the plant and run it right back through the process. We'll replace the wood you see in the picture on the left,
Yep.
there's these little stands that are about a foot off the concrete floor of that tank, and then there's a gridded floor over that entire thing. The air goes underneath that and comes up through 6 foot of wood chips, spreads out under the entire floor and comes up. Once that microbes grow on those wood chips, we continuously water that. It's one of the recycle uses of water. They eat any odor-causing compounds, and when that has sufficiently broken down to the point where we have higher resistance, then we remove that material, send it through the process, and replace the
Bill's
medium.
point, does that material in the filter,
Yep.
as he mentioned, it's ground up and put back through
back
the
through.
process. Does it actually get processed, or are we just building?
No, it
up
gets
a
turned into
residue
biochar.
we don't ever get rid of?
No,
It
it
turns
gets
into
turned
carbon.
into biochar.
Yeah.
It's a carbon. We get the carbon out of that just like any other feedstock.
Okay, fair enough, thank you.
Can the public speak?
I'm getting to that, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. So,
Council
My name's
questions?
Matt Funk. I'm with, I live in Ward 3. And one thing I haven't heard anything about is how this is going to impact traffic in town. We have a history. Utz is growing like crazy, which is great. We love growth. This project is awesome. I think it's a great tool. But you said you'll have 10 trucks a day? Where are they coming in? Which roads are they coming on? That hasn't been discussed by the borough.
it has actually, sir.
Well, actually, it has not been shared with us.
We have talked about potentially for mitigation of that concern,
I'm
about giving
worried-
them a prescribed route that the trucks can take, and possibly even a time of day. So we
I'm
are
worried that the
looking
state
at it.
of Pennsylvania is not supporting us.
It's a separate issue.
No, it isn't. You guys are, I'm not talking about, it's not his responsibility. It's not Chuck's responsibility. It's the borough's responsibility. The mayor should be going to the state and demanding money to support our growth. Our roads look terrible. You know, we want to bring business to Hanover, and you look at the main streets here, they're completely out of code. They look like crap. Who wants to come here? I think we need to pay attention to how this is going to impact us. I hope he can grow. I hope we can pull in more waste from our neighbors, but that means more trucks. That is more traffic. And I look at where you're gonna put this, the roads like, they don't look like they can support this on an industrial scale. That's up to you guys. Thanks.
Okay, anyone else? Yep, I'm gonna try to appreciate the hands up. I'm gonna try and see a hand, and I see you, and I see I'm coming this way next. The gentleman in the fourth row, you, sir. Yeah, sorry.
My name is Robert Bortner. I'm from Conewaga Township, so I probably shouldn't be here.
Welcome to
But we are vested in this because this facility, even though it's owned by the Borough of Hanover, sits in Conewaga Township, correct?
Yes.
Do they know about this going on?
Yes.
Yes, they do.
Because
Yeah,
I talked to
I've
somebody.
been to some of their Board of Supervisors meetings to talk to them about the facility and where it would be located.
And it
yes.
got approved?
We haven't gotten to that point yet.
Okay.
We just started cursory conversations because it's the correct thing to do. We should be engaging with them so that they're aware. So we have been talking to the board, I've been talking to the manager as well.
The only reason I showed up is because I saw in the article it said it resides in Conewaga Township.
Yeah.
So now you're crossing into Adams County too. Is that a problem?
Yeah, I mean, our treatment plant now sits in Conewaga Township. Our regional treatment plant that treats the waste also sits in Conewaga
Yeah,
Township.
because it's a different.
Correct, it sits at the old treatment plant
At
site.
the old
but
facility, yeah.
Yes, but it doesn't create any issues now. Not specifically, other than the ones that we'll certainly work through with Conewaga Township.
Because I talked to, I'm not even sure what it's, I'm not in the administration of any local government or anything, but I talked to a guy that sits on a supervisor. I even forget what it is. They said they go over a lot of issues and then send them up to the next level. The
Yeah, I'm
zoning
not sure
people
who
or
you talked to.
whatever. He said he never heard anything about it.
Yeah.
So-
The Board of Supervisors is who I've approached. I tried to go to the top level.
Okay. And is there any, well, I guess the point with that is, if something goes wrong, is Conewaga Township, Adams County responsible for any of this?
It's a private piece of land, so.
Well, I understand that,
That's
but,
why they have the insurance policies they're talking about taking out.
And then we own it.
and what happens if the pressure exceeds the limit that could contain in the unit and there's leak?
It's not,
explosion,
yeah.
whatever?
Yeah, I'm going to defer to the.
Is that a problem?
No, it's
No,
negative.
the entire system is under a vacuum.
Negative.
It's negative pressure. We induce that with a fan. We have emergency generators so that can always run if the system is running. So there's no scenario where it would be positive pressure, it's
It's
always
not a
negative
pressure, it's not like a pressure kettle.
No, correct.
I mean, when you say negative pressure, you're talking like 4 or 5 inches of mercury.
No,
Not even that,
way
not even
lower
that.
than that.
Okay.
We're at less than a half inch of water column.
Okay, so it's.
Very low
It's just
pressure.
enough to keep the
That's
Air
correct.
the air blowing in,
That's
not
exactly
blowing
right.
out.
Very low pressure.
Right. It's not like 3 Mile Island or something.
No, no.
All right, just
Nope.
Anything else, Mr.
put it
Porter?
in perspective.
Thank you. Gentleman on the left?
Scott Klunk, I'm not in the borough either, I'm outside of Conewaga Township, but he actually asked a similar question. Yeah, to my knowledge, Conewaga Township isn't real aware of this either, so Mr. Sweeney, how tall did you say that the scrubbers were?
The scrubbers are probably about 40 feet or so.
Okay, so you'll
30
okay, well, 30 feet, you'll meet the regulations, at 40 you won't. I'll tell you that because we just went through
In
that
industrial?
for the anaerobic digester that they're putting in.
Was that an industrial zone area?
Yes.
It was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Divert's the same, Divert was the same zoning as this
Yeah.
site.
Yeah, exactly.
But
And
they
then
were
the-
like
the other
50.
thing I was gonna
They were like
ask-
50,
To your
weren't
question,
they?
Eric and I
They
did
were.
visit
They were
the
50.
supervisors, so they are aware of the
Okay,
project.
I'm not.
But we haven't gone through the approval process
Correct.
yet.
Land
So
development.
that's just kind of a heads up. And I will agree with the truck traffic issue. So Ram Drive is industrial. Conewaga Township did wrong by making that industrial because all of the trucks dump onto Butler Avenue, which either come out at Frederick Street or worse yet at Fifth Street in McSherrystown, which is the problem. So I would try to work with Conewaga Township to get an entrance on the Mount Pleasant Road. Also, Mr. Thomas is here, so, the trucks from Second Street and McSherrystown are gonna be the main feeders to this, I'm gonna assume, since SWA is looking into it. So I'm glad to hear though that then you responded that you're looking at
Yeah,
avenues, routes that they have to take, because
we're aware of a lot of these issues, and this isn't, again, I referenced earlier, we're not just handing the keys over. This is,
no, I agree with that, no,
This
right.
is- this is
comes
our
back
project
to our own
and-
hook, right. But for traffic issues, Conowalk Township is on the hook. So, because it's their infrastructure. So, that was my only concern, but no, everything else I thought was a good presentation.
anybody else on this side? Oh, front row.
Yeah, hi, I'm John Contespo, I'm with Ward 2. Great presentation. I just wanted to say, it's more of a comment than anything else, and it's not directed towards you. It's directed to the borough. And I don't mean to imply you haven't done a good job of crafting the agreement. However, having been associated with some P3 projects before, it's always prudent to get a third party to do a review of the financial agreements, because at least the ones that I've been associated with, the Port of Baltimore and other places, they become very complex valuations of the value of the borough's contribution in terms of land, the highest and best use, the valuation of that contribution by providing the land, how that's reflected in the lease agreement. There's a lot of financial complexities, if you will, in these. I don't mean to imply this is highly complex compared to what we looked at the Port of Baltimore. But it's a good practice to have some third party who has the expertise in the economics and the financing and those elements to take a look at this as part of your due diligence process. It may cost you a few $1,000s to do that, to get the expertise of the right firm, but considering the long-term nature of this agreement and the funds at stake, it's probably worth it. So, just a comment.
Good point.
Good point.
Yep, I got you there. Nope, you. Yes.
The syngas, what is that made of? I have two environmental questions. What is that? Is that carbon monoxide? What is it after?
It's a mixture, so carbon monoxide, hydrogen, a little bit of methane, a little bit of nitrogen. Those are the main constituents of the syngas.
Is it, a lot of carbon monoxide? I only ask that because if you would have, and I know this probably won't happen, but just in case, if you have too much of a release, it really changes. It can change for people in the locale as far as breathing and things like that. Not necessarily there's no smell, but how it knocks off the oxygen, so on and so forth.
So there's a couple of different things on that. We have CO sensors in the facility itself. It all goes through the syngas reactor. That is monitored. That's reacted at high temperature.
Oxygen added.
And we have an air permit, so we do stack testing to see what those emissions are, to lock in basically what emissions are. We have very low CO emissions out of the final process.
And the other question was, the solid product that you get at the end, the char.
Yep.
So would that be spread around here, or are you selling it to go wherever, I might have missed that.
Yeah, so it could be, our solid waste permit with the state will allow land applications, but actually our focus has really been more in the construction materials and the concrete because of that carbon negative, that green concrete opportunity. They need that. If you see the concrete industry, the volumes that they work with are huge. So to make meaningful contracts with them, you need a lot of material. We would actually have to supply our customers from multiple facilities, including all the material that we would make here, some of the material we make at Bethel and some other facilities.
So just one more to that. So if you would have a solid product and it would be spread on like the farms, is that it's more of an acidity then? Because
The product?
yeah, would it
No,
be?
it actually has a higher pH.
Has a
You can, when we're done here, I've got materials right here, and we test it continuously, so we have
So it's not
analytical data, but it's a higher pH, it actually has some liming capacity.
Okay.
And it does have some nutrient NPK value, but generally, again, we're focusing on that concrete market.
Okay, thanks.
Could we have your name, ma'am?
Oh, Mandy with an I, Smith.
Mandy Smith. Thank you.
You're welcome, sorry.
Okay, and I see a hand right there, Mrs. Fong.
Yeah, Darlene Funk, Fifth Ward Council. I like the idea of the project, okay? And I listened to everyone speak here tonight, and I know that we have, it's not going to happen instantly, but we have to take all these into consideration. I'm very much concerned with our neighbors going through Conewaga and using your roadways as well as ours. That's going to cost money to keep that up because these are big trucks. Now, I'm assuming when they bring this to your facility, they're charged, you get money from the fact that they're bringing this into your facility in order to do the product.
Yep.
Right?
Correct.
Okay. I think what I'd like to see in our future meetings, which I know we're going to have, is to invite Conewaga and all surrounding areas that will in any way be affected besides Hanover.
They were invited, correct?
Were they invited?
Yeah.
You were invited.
Yep.
Everyone? Because I'm talking to
Conewaga.
people and they said they saw it in the newspaper that.
But the township
I went to the
staff was-
manager of each township and
Did you?
gave them the invite and told them, invite everybody and
Is that how
anybody.
you knew about it?
No, I saw it in the paper, but I'm not affiliated with the township.
Okay, and who was the other gentleman from Conewaga? You?
Yeah.
How did you find out about it? The newspaper?
Just a couple days ago. Last, online, I got an email from Evening Sun and read that.
I'm glad you all showed up.
too,
Are you?
and I see it on Facebook.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So if we contacted Conewaga,
I posted it.
huh?
I posted it.
Oh, I'm glad you did. But if we contacted them, why didn't they get this out to the people that are being
I
affected?
can't answer that question.
Yeah, we can't answer that. It's not.
Mrs. Funk, if you could ask the questions of the.
Right.
Of the,
Well, it's coming to light now that I would have liked to, I think we would have had twice as many people here, maybe not from the borough, but we're responsible for this project, very much so, okay? But we are also going to be using roadways, et cetera, that we're not responsible for. So I just want to be fair to everybody, our borough, and then also the surrounding communities.
we have the same
I'm sure we can
issue.
work something out. The project's good, but I just want to make sure that, I don't know, I'm just sitting here going, okay, we have communication, but communication kind of got locked up in certain areas, wasn't well disseminated.
I mean, the Conewaga, we have to have the approval, land development, stormwater, zoning, all those things have to
Right,
happen.
right.
And also, as it relates to
Yeah,
DEP.
I just want to make sure that everybody is fully aware when we hold meetings.
That is our engineers.
And
Responsive.
like Eric said, he contacted,
Right.
but where did the information get to them?
Okay,
you know?
yeah.
That's good. Got it.
we are-
I know,
yeah.
I'm just asking the questions, fellas.
I have, hang on, I had someone behind you in the gray sweatshirt.
John Griggs, I live in Cheetah Drive in Conewaga Township. Is this gonna be running 24-hour a day, 8 or 7 days a week?
I'd assume
And
so.
if
does.
something would happen, can you shut the place down instantly, the whole thing? Like if one of your scrubbers, you have trouble with the scrubber, can you shut the facility down until you get it fixed?
So it does operate 24/7. We have staff there 24/7. There are redundancies or processes within the system to address issues. They're designed to be resilient systems so that those are not issues. That's what the operators are trained to address.
I worked at Pixel, and they
Yeah.
had seen something like this,
Yeah.
And they had trouble, and,
Yeah.
that's why I worry
The-
about pollution.
One of the
They're doing telephone
good
poles.
things about the process is that we have that biofilter at the very end of the system, and there is no, other than the fact that we recycle water over it, it's a biological process that
It's not like it loses power or something. As long as you set it up correctly, you always have that process in
It's all
place.
just physical.
Yeah, correct.
Just while the door is open to the gentleman's question, do you have any idea of decibels outside the building when you're in operation?
It's relatively quiet. I don't know the exact number. Actually, we are doing a.
50,
yeah.
60 decibels.
And
Inside, you need to
it-
wear air
Yeah,
protection.
but outside is.
Really
But
also matters
outside,
how far away,
you-
but I
you
would
can
say
have
you're
a
50
normal, yeah.
outside.
Normal conversation outside.
But
So it's
we're
like a
actually.
dishwasher,
Correct,
basically.
yes.
It's a little
It's
bit, maybe a
50 to
little.
60.
The biggest noise components are material, equipment inside, the dryer, some of the augers inside, things like that. And those
blowers.
are all inside.
The blowers.
Hang on, I have a few hands that weren't you yet, so any hands on this side I haven't gotten to for an original question? Yes, Mr. Lookenbill?
Hey, look, Bill, Fifth Ward.
Yep.
Hey, so, you said about 15 people being hired there. Would they need degrees and whatnot, or you just hire local people that anybody can, like, anybody here can apply for the job and get it, or how does that work?
Most of the operator positions would be that way. They'll be trained in some of the more technical components of the facility, how to measure things, take samples, that kind of thing. But no, there's not special education for the typical operators there.
Okay. And then I saw that where you're putting the site, who's paying to clean that site up? Is that our responsibility to clean the site up before you guys?
There's this assumption it's dirty. It's not.
When you say clean it up, what do you mean by cleaning it up?
The prep.
You mean like site pad
It's
development?
pad ready?
Dump it at Cougar Drive, or are we talking about a different place?
Do you mean like spreading the site, making sure the site's level in order to build a building, that kind of thing?
Well, I've been to Cougar Drive, and it's quite a mess.
Yeah, but this is,
I'm not sure if they did.
He's talking
So-
about.
I don't believe we're
Land
accessing
development.
Cougar Drive,
No.
as we talked about earlier.
No, you're
South-
talking about the
so-
Put it at the dump.
no, so two things. I think South Jefferson Road will need some improvements, and we've talked to them about that. So if that's your point, yes, South Jefferson does need some improvements for their purposes. For the pad development itself, that's a cost that they would incur. They would have to level that site out, make it appropriate for the development, grade it, erosion control, stormwater. That would be to them, not to the borough.
So I saw we have 140 earmarked or invested in this already.
Where's that? I'm not sure where's that from?
I saw it in on the budget thing, 140,000.
No, we spent about 22,000 so far. And can you describe?
Yeah, so.
We spent 22,000, but that was split
Like
between us,
survey.
between the borough and stormwater.
Correct. Yeah, so when we were looking at this originally for a public works site, we did commission a survey because, we needed to know what the land looked like in order to go down that path. When that kind of put on the back burner because of 33 and 44 and what transpired there, we still had that survey. So that survey was handed to them so that they could use that for part of their site layout. Initially, we had been looking at the active regional treatment plant site, but because of issues with, again, being a good neighbor, understanding that there was a lot more residential around that site, we ultimately decided that wasn't the best site for it. Operationally, that was the best site for it because that's where you were generating biosolids, so for it to be right there made sense. But it didn't make sense from the standpoint of having all those residences around there. And so at that point, then it went to the regional plant because that put it in an industrial setting, and that was a much more suitable environment for it. But I don't know where the 140,000 is coming from.
It may
That's
have
not.
been budgeted, but it's not been spent on
wasn't
that.
budgeted.
It wasn't even budgeted.
Nope.
Yeah, it was erroneously reported somewhere that it was like 140,000 was spent so far on this
Yeah.
project, and no one knows what it is. I don't know where that came from, but it's not true.
No.
Did you have anything else?
Let me get back to you, see if anybody else has one.
Okay, I'm coming back
It's not a
around
complete
again.
free ride either.
Oh, again, I'm looking for new people. Mr. Fuentes.
Brian Fuentes, First Ward. You did mention that the char would be, ultimately, you're focusing on putting it in the concrete. Is there any other products? And to just kind of add to this gentleman's question, you did say a lot of pros. We hear all about your pros. Do you have any cons? I mean, is there anything negative that you've experienced in the past that we may need to look into up front before we start?
This
making
process.
I mean, not so much that we have to, a lot of what we do, well, let me start with the products first.
Yes.
Generally, out of our biochar facilities, we have 3 end product marketplaces. One is an agronomic for our ag waste materials. We won't be generating any of that from this facility, so we won't be marketing in that area. The other one is remediation. Because this material is very much like granular activated carbon, those are opportunities to adsorb PFAS, for example, ammonia, metals, things like that. It does a very good job of absorbing those. So that is a potential market. And then the third market is the construction materials market. And that's obviously where our focus is, but we do probably want to reserve some of it for our remediation, because that's actually a higher value, lower volume marketplace.
And the fourth is the wood.
The fourth is the wood, yeah.
For direct stormwater.
And really, as Chuck mentioned, depending on formulations, it can be used for stormwater applications as well.
Chuck, when we used it at the high school to improve the penetrate, what category would that fall under?
That would have been the wood.
That's wood, yeah.
Thank you.
So, challenges, I mean, pretty much our risks are kind of what I stated before, managing the entire process and making sure that the economic component works. We have multiple similar systems out there operationally, but it's management components, it's financial components. Obviously, at the end of the day, you have to be appropriately capitalized to make sure that the system runs effectively. And so that becomes our focus to ensure that we're setting up the project for success. In this case, that's why we're looking at a 2-module facility to ensure that all the financial components work. That, to one of the gentleman's questions or comments, that financial component is very closely looked at Penvest and the state level because they would be providing us those loans. So there's definitely a pretty hard scrub of that at that level to ensure that we're a financeable project. Yep.
The wood chips that are there.
Yep.
Do we have any problems with combustible, when you put wood?
They will be soaked,
Saturated.
soaking wet.
You're keeping them soaking wet?
Soaking wet, yes.
And then it,
And the air coming into that's about 100 degrees, so there's no combustion opportunity there.
okay, that's what I
Yeah.
wanted to know, thank
Yep.
you.
Okay, I have the lady in the side.
Christine Rapp, I also live in Hanover Township, down at the end of Ram Drive where it turns into a residential area. I think the project is good, and like you said, it's industrial zoned up until that point. So I just had one question and then like a comment. What is the actual address of the plant? Is it Jefferson Street or is it off of Ram?
I think
it's
it carries
300.
an address off of Cougar, actually.
Okay.
I think it's like 300 Cougar or something like that,
Because my
yeah.
concern was also about access, just because Jefferson itself is essentially a gravel dirt road at that point of Jefferson. And access from Ram can be difficult and limited, and it is a residential area, so just keeping that in mind, in that there are already a lot of 24-hour operations on that street, there's just not a lot of 24-hour heavy truck traffic. So that.
Oh, no, delivery
Like I
wouldn't be
said, there are
24/7.
already
No,
just
generally
industries
not.
that are running
They're just
24/7,
operating.
so I don't know that that's
That made it clear
necessarily
by the-
any additional concern, at least from my perspective as a resident of
Yeah.
that area. But just like the additional traffic, and if you're taking into consideration limiting traffic so that it's at hours that are less for traffic, that is also a residential area with a number of houses and apartments.
So on this drawing, we are coming off of, in this case, South Jefferson, and we limit, obviously, there's a balancing act, and we'll have to understand where the borough needs to be there, but generally, we don't accept materials at night. So that's some limitation that, may mitigate some of those concerns. It does operate 24/7, but we don't accept material 24/7.
Yeah, then that's gonna have to be a kind of other issue because the access on Jefferson Street it won't be accessible from large trucks. It runs.
It has to be rebuilt.
Yeah.
That's part of the project.
Between a house and a florist shop onto a dirt road, which I know you've been to that.
Yeah, we have to rebuild that road.
Just a point of order before
We
we
would have
move on
to
to
do
the
it for
next
Public Works
question. We have about 7 minutes left, so if you have something important, please try and use our time wisely. Mr. Bortner, you're up again.
Yeah, I was just gonna, you said that some of the townships were invited and they didn't show up. I think because of all these other questions here, they should be involved in another meeting to know what issues residents of those areas have.
We'd love to have them here, but we can't make them come.
No, I understand that.
You
but now
can,
that the
I can't.
questions have arisen, that
Yes.
people may be concerned with it.
Go ahead.
I just have a comment. I'm from Penn Township. I'm the township manager. This is our president, board president. Eric Means did a very good job of inviting all the local municipalities. The borough did a fantastic job advertising on Facebook. Unfortunately, Facebook is now our main means of information.
Good or bad?
For the community, exactly. But I think you did a fabulous job.
You don't have any.
Thank you. Mr. Holt?
Real quick, and this is the point I was getting to when I talked about the odor. It just seems to get all around it, but not on it. When you have a mechanical failure and you shut down the facility in midstream of production, what happens with the air? It's no longer going to go through the forced air system. It's
Well,
going to
no.
seep out.
Well, point number one, we have, let's say we lost power, you have emergency generators to address that. Point two, because it's hot, it creates a draft system that continues pulling that either way. And three, I would invite you to come visit us. You can stand right next to our front door. You will not smell anything.
Oh, I'm coming. It's just
Excellent.
I'm a working guy, so.
Understood.
Yeah.
Let me know when you would like to come. We'll make it work.
I'm coming. It's just, it's hard to believe that in 30 years, there won't be a total mechanical breakdown of some type.
There certainly will be at some point. That does not mean that the whole area is swamped with odors. And it's hard, I don't have a smellometer here to bottle it up and hand it to you and say, hey, here, you can't smell anything. You can certainly smell our final product. There's no odor to this. Come visit us.
And using these materials and building materials is called, what the lobbyists in DC call beneficial uses. It's how they describe it when they pitch it to people.
Moving this way. Mr. Chairman, hang on, I have a new person. I'll come back to you. Yes.
Matt Mueller, Ward 2. So I guess this goes to council. Has there been any other companies with the same business model looked at other than the one that we have here today?
To my knowledge, no. They came to us.
And I will point out, we're the only ones that build, own, operate, and maintain our own facilities. Everybody else sells them. So if you would like to buy one, they would probably sell you one, but they would not be willing to take on the financial risk of the facilities.
Nor revenue share.
No revenue share.
They keep it for themselves.
Okay, Brian, question?
I had a question, just, this is new technology to us, but it's not new technology that's been around for a while and tested for a while, correct? I mean, this
correct.
dates back to 2012, I think I've seen some of the
Well,
earlier.
gasification is hundreds of years.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about this type of model where you're building a
This
gasification.
specific unit, yes, that's correct. The overall pyrolysis gasification is very old technology.
Yeah, I just meant the use of it, how we're using it today.
Yeah.
And the only other thing that I wanted to do is maybe make a recommendation. I know there's effort involved, but I think it would be beneficial to create a landing page or something on your website. I've been on your website and I've seen your landing page for your Bethel project.
Yeah.
Which is great. And I think doing something like that for this project in the borough that you can reference individuals
Maybe
to
we'll make a
that aren't
microsite or
here.
something.
Well, it's just more of a, are we to that stage, or are we false advertising?
Well,
Yeah,
no,
legally, I don't know if we can, because there's no contracts
Okay.
yet.
But
Okay.
we're going to, that's why we're recording this meeting, and we were going to use that as an instructional tool going forward.
Okay, gotcha, okay.
One last question. How many facilities have you built thus far?
We've got 1, 2, 3, 4,
11.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
We have
All around the world.
we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the US.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay, before I conclude, I'll give a thank you to all interested parties that came out and for participating in a very civil exchange of your rights as the citizenry, as well as the execution of your government. Much appreciated as a personal thanks to me. Again, this was a meeting, but not an official meeting for those of you following along because we did not have a quorum. We elected at our discretion to commence with the presentation as it was in all of your interest to do so. At this time, I request a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
I'll second it. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.